So I'm really nervous. I'm always really nervous, especially when I talk to academics, because all of you outrank me in terms of research, and then I have to prove that I'm super smart, because otherwise why should I be here? Thank you for laughing at that, because obviously I need some support. No, sorry. I'm really nervous, and I hope that I can give you something that goes beyond what you could think would be interesting to ask of me, in terms of that you can't anticipate that I could tell you that, and then I will tell you stuff that you couldn't have asked, and then maybe this will spark some conversation that goes in some depth that I usually don't reach with public speaking, because usually it's for time issues. Let's see if I deliver this, and if not, I will be the only one who knows the difference between this one and my other talks. So that's, thank God. Okay. I want to start with something frankly, because when I got the request, I was angry. This is due to the fact that I get a lot of requests to speak, and they usually are very, very similar to each other. People tell me what excellent work I do, and how inspirational it is, and what they think I could bring, and it angers me because I know that to an extent this is not true. And it's not true because I'm not that exceptional. I'm just very loud. And this is a key difference. I get a lot of media attention, I get a lot of public attention, but all of the work of people in the team that work with me becomes invisible to you, because all you see is what I then do when I perform in whatever public area that I am. And all of the learnings, the relationships that I needed to be here become invisible. And it looks like Marlene can just do it, and she can't. I can't. I need a lot of support. I have various teams that I work with, and I just wish sometimes when I get requests that they're like, you and your teams and the people you work with, you do good work. Would one of you like to speak? Not always me. Because how much can I tell you, really, that you haven't read already? So that's why I'm going to try to break out of tonight. And when I got angry about that, I was like, they're like telling me how unique I am, and I can't because it makes me so uncomfortable. It's like rich tears, right? And then, Jesus, I get so frustrated with myself, so I have to let it out on you. And then I was like, I'm going to get back at them and make them feel uncomfortable. It's like, how do I do that? I will do a rhyme of tax and sex. Because let's talk about tax maybe is a line from a song that actually goes, let's talk about sex, baby. I didn't want to call you babies though, so I went with maybe. This is the amount of gumption I actually have. Tiny. But yeah, so this is what I do. I get angry and I do a half-assed kind of pun, but Jesus. And then here I am. And I said that because when I was putting down, and make this analogy, because actually there's a lot of things that talking about money and talking about sex have in common, especially shame, guilt, things that you don't talk about, silence, and then also violence that happens in contexts of sexual activity, and also the breach where it's not sexual anymore, but sexualized violence. And with money, it's the same. Like, there's a lot of shame, there's a lot of guilt, there's stigma, and there's a lot of violence that can be done and harm that can be caused through the ways that money is used. So, yesterday night and yesterday afternoon, I was like sitting down to prepare this properly. I realized maybe before I go into the whole fetish part, because taxes are my fetish if money is my sex, right? Let that sink in. I might have to take myself more seriously than I anticipated and talk about something or try an approach that is also very important with all things concerning sex, which is vulnerability and openness. So I'm going to try to, hopefully, intertwine well structural phenomena and my story and how they play out and what to do about them and how to address them and how to get out of them. Again, not to cry some rich tears and some white tears while I'm at it, but to acknowledge the harms that are being done and the structures that also play out in my story and in how I act and in what I get to do and in who gets to listen to me and who has to listen to me. So yeah, I wrote down the whole thing, and then I wrote it down again and again and again till I got down to these tiny notes at which I will look, because I'm not confident enough to do it free-flowing. So yeah. We should, I guess, start with the very beginnings. When we talk about money, in my case, that means when I was young, I grew up in a mansion. And you wouldn't call it a mansion. You would call it a big house. It's a villa, for crying out loud, but you call it a big house, or just a house. And that's exactly where it begins, when you don't call it what it is, when you don't give the thing the name that it has. I grew up immensely privileged, immensely wealthy, very, very white, and had no idea. It's a little bit like the fish in the water. You ask a fish in water, it's like, what's water? And they're like, what? What? Water? And it's the same with me in wealth. I couldn't see it because it was the most normal thing. It was the most normal thing never to think about money as something that was needed, as something that could be scarce, but always to consider money as something that was there anyway, and basically that goods and services that I wanted just flowed my way whenever I wanted them. My wanting was the magic button that got these things, except if my mom was like, no. Other people think about money, worry about money. I learned this a lot later than I care to admit, but I will admit it in a minute. And obviously I went to private kindergarten, private school, so I was surrounded by a lot of wealthy, privileged, and a lot of white kids. I stress this so much because these things are not disconnected from each other. And I realized eventually, I think it took me to be in public university to figure out why I couldn't figure out that I was wealthy. Because I could figure out that you're not. Because all of a sudden I was surrounded by people with a lot of class privilege still at university in Vienna, but not a lot of wealth. And those people, they talk about money a lot. They talk about how much things cost. When they visit your home, they ask you how much rent you pay for the flat that you have. They compare bills in order to see whether they pay too much or not a lot actually for the energy. They tell you that they got this fancy piece of clothing that they love for a bargain and they're really proud. And I don't want to say that any of these things is annoying or anything. I just thought it weird. I thought it weird because my class, the owning and ruling class, doesn't talk about money. We own it. It's ours anyway. And so we get really wonky and intransparent and weird around money. We don't really talk numbers. We might talk business, but we round up and down by a few thousand, tens of thousands of euros easily, if not millions, because it's all the same to us. But for the 99% other, it's not all the same. It's a flippin' couple of thousand euros. Worth talking about, isn't it? And so I realized maybe they all talk about money. I don't. What's wrong with me? And I realized also they all work, or almost all of them work next to university, not because it's so fancy on your CV, because you need to pay your rent, because they didn't have a bank account like mine, where pocket money appeared every month higher than the median gross income in Austria. And to me, this was normal. And I don't want to say I was blameless in this. I could have thought about stuff. I'm not that thick. I hope. Thanks for laughing quietly. But what it really showed me is that eventually I would have to start talking about money. But I can't invent it. So what am I going to do? I have to talk about my actual money. And so I did. And the first time I did, I almost doubled over and couldn't say it. And I was like sitting in an armchair, like similar to this one. And I was like, oh my God, oh my God. And I had my head between my knees. I was really making drama, absolutely unnecessary drama. And the person in front of me was eventually like, just spit it out. And then I kind of did. So embarrassed, I'm so sorry. Anyway, you have to live through this with me now. I don't even know if you get much out of this. I certainly learn. And I was like breaking a sweat. And I wondered, am I the only weird person around money like at all? Or is this more common among my people? And who the hell are they anyway? So I started talking to friends about money. I started being candid about it, being frank about it, encouraging criticism, because I was like, you don't have to think any of that is wonderful. And I was so weird about it. I made so many mistakes, and I was so insensitive a lot of the time, you know? A little bit like right now, where a lot of you, I assume, I have no idea, but I assume a lot of you are not as wealthy as I am or used to be. And you all have to listen to me now. And it was the same with my friends. They had to listen to me struggle with my wealth and my privilege. Rich tears, remember? Jesus. And I realized what it wasn't that I should be ashamed and figure out how to deal with the shame and the guilt. And yeah, frankly, you always have to do that. Everybody has to do that, though. So that's not so special. What's really special about it is that it recreated a system of disrespect. Because when I'm with friends and I expect openness, vulnerability, authenticity of them, that they let me into their lives, that they share their intimacy with me, their experience, their worries, I want to be there and support them, I want to be a friend. Well, I can't be the one not offering that. I can't wall up. What am I walling up? What am I hiding behind? Why? What am I protecting? Is it really me? Is it my wealth? Is it both? I haven't really figured this out. I think it's just that wealth and identity are so intermingled when you come from my class that it's so difficult to disentangle them that most don't bother to try. And that also, if you really want to go the whole way, it also eventually leads to you asking yourself, what of this do I keep? The wealth or the me? So this system of disrespect brings me to what it's like in society, where it's pretty much the same thing. We have a wealthy, owning and ruling class, the top 1%, if you will, and they wall themselves off of society, of which they are fully dependent, without which they couldn't be and do who they are and what they do. And so these structures really played out in my life, and eventually I started to nerd myself into the whole money issue, and I got to meet other wealthy people. Because I'm a loudmouth, I am the kind of person who goes head through the wall, and then I look at, okay, that's debris I was accounting for, like that's fine, but that's a collateral damage. I'm so sorry that this debris landed on your toes again, right? So I'm not exactly sensitive, I'm not exactly careful, but that's how I met a lot of people who did not expect my head to burst through their walls. And I was like, hi, you're also rich? And they were like, I won't tell you. I was like, come on. I was a little more polite than that. And eventually I was surrounded by people who had the same struggle, and I realized, really, this is something that happens to wealthy people. They disconnect. This is what's the opposite of solidarity? Should have Googled this yesterday night in terms of preparation. So it's counter solidarity. It's a certain kind of egotism that you get taught when you're in wealth, when you grow up wealthy. And it's a socializing issue. It's not necessarily that somebody tells you, don't you ever dare. Well, actually I was told, don't talk about money, ever. It's rude. You don't do it. Ever. So I don't know. But yeah, I got to make this connection with my friends through being open, and I got to make connection with other people with wealth and trying to figure out what we could do about it that was beyond being open in our friends' circles, which is all fair enough and nice and good. But what could we do with our wealth that we now finally figured out how to get a hold of instead of being held by it? And so we tore down the walls and we left a mark, because you can't redistribute all of your privilege. It's not possible. I can't redistribute that I'm white, or I will always be. I can't redistribute my class privilege and my connections and all other sorts of things, like my able-bodiedness. Can't redistribute that. So you gotta leave a mark to where the wall was in order to never forget what you should consider is normal to you and how your reactions might have already been shaped by however you were socialized. And I say you, but I should have said I, so I'm sorry. So I should never forget how whatever I do is shaped by my socialization. That came out weird. And where am I? Exactly. And I came across a very, very, very cool line that I think applies to me as well as to any politician. Don't tell me your values. Show me your budget, and I tell you your values. Which to me meant I needed to figure out whether I meant it to dismantle the dynamics of power and of wealth and of structural privilege that I was in and that I could use, whether I had a backbone that fit all of my ideals about social justice, or whether whatever that was that kept me upright was more like maybe a blocked colon, which basically means I'm full of shit. And so yeah, now we're here, and I get to talk to you because with those friends I made that are also wealthy, we co-founded taxmenow in order to use the privilege we have and our role as rich and privileged people in the media and in every public space that will have us, frankly, in order to talk about the fact that not only can we pay taxes, because we have the money, but we must and we demand it. And it's a weird experience for a rich person like me to ask a government to do something and then they don't. I guess now that I redistributed most of my wealth, almost done with that, I'll have to get used to it, so maybe that will make me a person that keeps in solidarity with others, because it's weird. They should have taxed me, I told them to. And because I also redistributed the money, not only talked about it structurally on the media for like almost 4 years now, I tell the same story again and again and again. Tax me, please, it's very important. Wealth equals power, we gotta redistribute it. That's how we save democracy, you guys. Here are my facts and figures. I don't need to tell you facts and figures, you all know how to research. Maybe later in the question round, we'll see. And the journalists ask the same questions again and again. It's like they don't learn. And sometimes I understand, because they're like, look, Marlene, not everybody has seen your one interview with I don't know who in TV station, I don't know what. And then I'm like, yes, of course. I reply to people, whatever they ask me, and if they ask me 1 billion times, it's the least I can do in terms of showing up and answering to them, because it's the only kind of accountability and respect that I can actually perform and be authentic about. But some journalists, I really demand that you do a little bit of your research, because I don't want to have to give stage to all of these, I'll say it, bullshit myths around wealth, because they are debunked. Even Joe Biden said, don't bother me with flippin' trickle down. It's boring. It's just, no, right? I don't want to have to be asked the same weird questions that in the question reproduces the narratives and the myths that also reinforce beliefs about it's impossible to tax rich people. No, it's not. It's a question of whether you have a law or not. They will all flee. Some might, but make it illegal, and they might not. Tie tax to the citizenship. Do it like Norway. They just got a 54% increase in their tax on wealth because they raised it to 1.1%. A couple left. How egotistical and rude to leave a country that made you wealthy and be like, that's all mine now. Really? You don't get to have some. I want yours. Jesus, are we out of kindergarten yet? I guess not. I want to have an actual debate, not about whether we should tax rich people like me, but about how we could do this. Just imagine a debate where the conservative position is that the minimum tax on wealth should be 1% and it should be progressive, but it should not go over 7% because that is the average growth rate of wealth per year. And this is the most progressive thing you can expect of a conservative party. And then the progressive party can go like, we gotta go much higher and we gotta redistribute to the point of asking the question of who owns what and how we redistribute property among society and how we deal with that shit, because that's a more interesting question. And then the liberals could be, you guys, inheritance tax first, because the market is unequal if we don't. That would be a liberal position that I'm waiting for someone to claim, and then I can finally debunk that, but let's get there. Just imagine this kind of tax situation when we talk real tax, real policies, and not how to keep power within the hands of the few, which basically reconstructs a neo-feudal system which will always be at odds with democracy. You can't have feudalism and democracy. You can't have oligarchy and democracy. There will be conflict, and one of them will try to subdue the other, and we see what that looks like. Currently in the news, it's not, you don't even have to go to the US. Right at home in Austria. Thanks for nothing, Conservative Party. So yeah, I can teach you to research facts. You know how to do that. But what I would like to do is to have invited you into how these structures go so deep into people like me that we're so blinded by privilege that what I need you to know is not only that you can't count on us, rich people will not save anything for you. We are burning your planet and home, which is also ours, but we pretend like we can go to Mars. But you can tax us. You're many more. You're extremely bright. I have not met a person yet who was willing to listen and willing to tell me their story, who didn't really have a good idea about what should be done and what could be done. I don't have to tell you that. But there is no reason to think that people like me are going to be the big pleasurers of society, to return to my whole sex deal. We're not going to satisfy you. You need to do it yourselves. You need to ask for what feels good. Taxes feel so good. And I want to invite you into my fetish world of wealth taxes, inheritance taxes, capital gain taxes. Say progressive, say it again. Get the money back from the banks, get the money back from the energy companies, because they made much more gains than were to be expected. So it's fair enough that we get some of that back into society, without which it wouldn't have landed there, because flows of wealth are very easily explained, right? Where does my wealth come from? It's your rent, it's your jobs, because you create through your work the profit that I as an owner pocket alone. It's your taxes. When I give a loan, when I lend some money to the government, buy bonds for instance, they pay that back with interest. That's your tax money, right? So whatever we do, unless my money is taxed back into the system, I stand for the 1%, right? Your money will inevitably flow towards me. And it shouldn't only be about my pleasure and my wants and my lust for money. It should be about yours too. And so yeah, we're not unstoppable. My class, the ruling and owning class, is not unstoppable, but it needs a lot of effort to stop someone without being violent yourself. And I know that it's doable, but I'm not going to say that it's easy, and I'm not going to say that it's going to happen quickly. But I really, really, really have learned so much from the friends who started listening to me when I was an idiot about how to talk about my money, feeling my feelings first and being very insensitive, teaching me that, telling me to my face, like, what the fuck did you just tell me? How dare you? You can only literally afford to be like that because you're rich like that. Your position only reflects your wealth and your privilege and nothing but that. I'm grateful like nothing else to these experiences. And I'm grateful to all the activists and mentors that I met along the way who taught me about thinking more broadly, how to support movements, go into mobilizing and organizing work, be part of the fight and not think that you alone can do anything because you can't. And so that's actually a relief. And I hope that maybe I didn't crawl into your brains. Again, you outrank me academically. But maybe I can ignite some hope back into some of you I don't know if that was a correct grammatical sentence. I don't even know if that was one. Jesus. I'd only studied that, but I have no degree, so I have an excuse, right? I want to ignite some hope. I want to spark some interest into my fetish world of taxation. I'm curious to hear from you what you want to know, what I can perhaps tell you, or what you would like to tell me so that I can take it home. It's always valuable as well. And I just want to say, we're standing on, I don't know if you realize, but I try every day, we're standing on the shoulders of people who have worked to get us democracy and to get us a welfare state and public infrastructure, and we're headed for catastrophe unless we fight for that, unless we realize that, and unless we become the next set of shoulders on which the next generations can then stand broadly, because we're so many, because democracy is worth every fucking effort. Thank you.